Gentlemen, are we agreed? Do we have a covenant to take the world? To sum up our work, our hard work for these years, with our vast resources of financial power, we shall use the power of finance to gain control over all government central banks through our central banking scheme. We shall sell that concept to all governments, or they shall face collapse. We shall infiltrate and take over all key positions of governments and then steer them towards our ultimate objectives, which is a one world government which we shall control with an iron fist. We shall set up corporations and foundations that interlock with all government agencies. These huge entities shall become reservoirs of all the world's wealth and power. We shall use them to direct and control the masses from behind the scenes. We shall pit governments against governments to keep the war machines in motion. For war is necessary for our success and is our key to profitability. We shall instigate no less than 3 world wars and control their direction and outcome by the means of finance and power that we have within the governments to accomplish our end objectives, a world government. We shall use the war machine to control populations and to manipulate the masses so that they will demand huge militaries for their defense, and will demand huge outlays for research and development in weapons and weapon systems. We shall finance all corporations involved in the war efforts, thus ensuring our direct control over these corporations at all times. We shall by this method acquire the ultimate weapons of war, by which we then control the world. We shall, after each major war in which millions will be killed, advance the concept of a world government, and that the reasons for war are sovereign nations, and by eliminating sovereign nations, by eliminating them, gentlemen, we can bring peace. So we slowly indoctrinate the masses of the world to the concept of a unified planet without nations, a world federation with a standing army that controls all the weapons of war. We shall introduce the concept of mental health and slowly spread it throughout the world with mental health clinics throughout the nations. And by the use of mental health, we shall destroy all those who disagree with us. Our platform shall be one of peace, love, and brotherhood, so that anyone who disagrees with us will appear to be against humanity, against tolerance, against love, against peace and brotherhood. By this means of doublespeak, we shall annihilate all who oppose us. We shall infiltrate all media, slowly gain control, and use it to manipulate the opinions of the masses. We will topple the world order so that we may bring in our new world order. We shall destroy Christianity from within by infiltration and false doctrine. We shall wipe the name of Jesus Christ off the face of planet Earth. The masses of people, sick of war, crime, and poverty, shall, after the final Holocaust, agree with our objectives, and will demand by that time that our world government body, which we have created ourselves, take control over the world and all the world's weapons. Excuse me, gentlemen. Then, gentlemen, by their own consent, the masses will be ours. The world will be ours, and we can then show our true intentions and bring to the fore our real plans. We shall do it through our final world government body, which we shall call in the end the United Nations. And we shall be able to do as we wish, for no one will be able to oppose us. No one will be able to make war with us. No one can stop us. The gates of heaven cannot prevail against us. To Lucifer, gentlemen, to Lucifer, the King of kings and the Lord of lords, the God of reason and the God of all light. To our children and our children's children, the undisputed masters of the world, the sovereigns, the kings, to them all, gentlemen, we toast.
The Bible absolutely declares that as we approach the time of the end, that the rich men of the world would get together and attempt to form a one world order. They would do it by conspiracy, according to the scriptures, secret meetings. They would gather themselves together and outline a plan using the power of finance in order to gain control, infiltrate governments, set nations against nations, gather together the central banks of all the nations under their thumb, and then bring about the formation of a new world order. The Bible very emphatically does point the finger at the rich men of the earth as the killers of the just. This system is absolutely fantastic in its diabolical intelligence. The Bible says, "But they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is the root of all evil." Now the word love means in essence avarice, or greed, covetous, an inordinate amount of it, bordering almost, according to the definitions, to the point of insanity. Avarice means the insatiable greed for riches or an inordinate desire to gain and hoard wealth. In other words, they are misers, and they gather together all the wealth of the world that they can. They never have enough. They never have enough money, and they never have enough power. Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fired. You have heaped together treasure for the last days. That's exactly what avarice or greed mean. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. They just gather everything unto themselves, including all the nations and all the people. In the book World Revolution, A Plot Against Civilization by Nestor Webster, which even Winston Churchill quoted from and thought was a very accurate book, which we here at CIA have proved out it is. Soon we will start organizing great monopolies, reservoirs of colossal wealth. This was in the protocols that were discovered many, many years ago by the Bavarian government. These are the plans that they had laid back, even in the 1700s, to bring about their New World Order. We established this new aristocracy on the wealth of which we had control. In other words, the whole thing is based upon wealth. It's based upon finance. We must improve and regulate the state monopolies, which we have established, and thereby prepare for state monopolization. And that was Lenin that made that quote. And Lenin was nothing more than an agent, really, for the Illuminati powers that put him there. We advocate a merciless dictatorship, Lenin said. And that is exactly what the international bankers will bring about once they get into power. The goal is a worldwide dictatorship using the power of money to accomplish it. That's the entire concept, and it agrees totally with Scripture. And it is to bring all the people of the world into this system. The plan has been established for many years. The protocols, the Communist Manifesto, the Humanist Manifestos 1 and 2, the plan uses the power of money to gain a control, and that is why the Bible places the blame on the rich men of the earth. It's a very diabolical scheme, and in fact, so diabolical that it really could not lose. This plan will be carried out. They will accomplish it. And they are declared to be the powers behind this entire fantastic scheme. And we're going to try and prove to you in this video that the United Nations is the instrument that they are attempting to advance to come to full power. Through their foundations, through their corporations, through their central banking scheme, through their banks that they hold all the wealth of the nations. And they keep back even the due wages of all the people in the world. They tax them, and they take all this money away and set up their system. The love of money is the root of all evil. The word evil means depraved, or essentially diabolically evil. It's depraved, bad, harmful, wicked. When the Bible calls something evil or wicked, you better believe that it is not from an overstatement. It's emphatically declaring the evilness of this system. No man can serve two masters, said Jesus. You cannot serve God and mammon. Now, the word mammon means wealth or confidence in wealth, putting all of your faith, all of your trust in your money. Money is never categorized as bad in the Scriptures per se. It is the love of money that causes evil. Money is to be an instrument for good. They turn it around, they use it for evil. They are of the world, therefore they speak of the world, and the world heareth them. Excuse me. Ye have despised the poor. Do not rich men oppress you and draw you before the judgment seats? Do they not blaspheme that worthy name by which you are called? They hold Jesus Christ up to ridicule. They are attempting, in reality, to take the throne away from Christ, who bought it with his death on the cross. The identity of the Antichrist forces is made very clear in James chapter 5. He identifies them as you rich men. And it's very interesting that the Bible in both the Old and the New Testament points a finger at the rich men of the earth, that the spirit of mammon takes them onto a journey into utter destruction and utter perdition. Behold, the hire of the laborers who hath reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth, and the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of the Sabbath. Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth and been wanton. Ye have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter. Ye have condemned and killed the just, and he does not resist you. In the Scriptures, the saints are called the just. And this is a direct accusation that the rich men of the earth condemn and then kill the saints of God. The merchants of Babylon are called the great men of the earth, the rich men of the earth, and the merchants are tied to the international bankers. They form a network. Here in Revelation it says, For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. This is a tremendous deception that these bankers bring in, and they use the power of finance to bring this deception upon people. They sound very godly and saintly men interested in the affairs of humanity, but behind it all, they have another agenda, and that is to condemn and kill, literally, millions of people. And it is in Babylon the Great that is found the blood of the prophets and of saints and of all that was slain upon the earth. The system of Babylon is as old as Nimrod, right after the flood. Founded the very first Babylon, and you can trace it all the way through, and you will find its surface in full bloom here in the United States of America. And it is in mighty Babylon that all of this takes place. For all the nations have drunk the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. Babylon is a huge nation. Many people teach that Babylon is just a system, and that's incorrect. It is both a system, a nation, a literal city, and in the systems it has a political system, it has a religious system, a trading system, and a banking system. All of these comprise what makes up the doctrine of Babylon. The essential thing we're going to focus on here at this moment will be the financial aspects of it. And it is the center of financial trade. And we're going to find out that New York City is in fact the literal great city Babylon, which sits in the literal nation Babylon the Great, which is the United States of America. We don't have time to prove it all right now, but we will be able to get into some of the parameters which identify the United States and the United States only as being the ones involved in this conspiracy. Who lends money? Why, the bankers. And who are the killers of the just? Again, it's the bankers. And the scriptures make it very, very clear that the bankers would infiltrate into the nations. They're called strangers here, which means aliens, and they will get above that nation very high and bring the population down very low or under them, and they are lending. They're lenders. And that is exactly what the rich men of the earth have done. They've infiltrated the central banks of the governments, set up a scheme whereby they would lend money to the governments, and eventually they will call in the note and foreclose on that nation and take the nation and the people. That's the whole concept behind it. The Antichrist system, regardless of what you have been told, is first and foremost a system of finance and economic system. It's a system by which they control things through the power of economics. That does not mean that there is not a religious concept or a political concept behind it, but that it is predominantly controlled through money. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. That is an economic system which controls buying and selling, that no man might buy or sell. That is predominantly an economic system whereby the buying and selling is totally controlled by these rich men of the earth. So what we have, in essence, is total control over everybody through economics. And one of the parts of this thing is your Social Security number, believe it or not. But buying and selling are economic activities, and this is a total control over all economics, or economic slavery, according to Revelation. And Revelation says that the buying and selling are going to be so totally controlled that it is absolute slavery, beyond anything that we can actually comprehend, beyond anything we have ever seen on the earth right now at this point in time. It's very interesting that over 2,000 years ago that this would be set up. Here we have in the background there a Social Security card, and it says not to be used for identification, but it's used for checking accounts, savings accounts, driver's license, employment, military IDs, national ID cards. Will be next in this system. There's absolutely no question that they're going to use it. Here we have a UN identification card that is used already, and we believe that will be next from the United Nations once the United States goes under it. And everybody will be required to carry it. Here's a letter from the Social Security Administration. It's very interesting what was said in this letter. You can simply stop using your number and refuse to furnish it to anyone, they say. In other words, they don't deny that you can not use it. However, such action could result in a loss of employment, inability to conduct financial transactions, inability to get a driver's license. In other words, it's a total stop program, or vehicle registration, or any other number of serious problems. In other words, they've set it up in such a way that you absolutely have to use your Social Security number, or if you don't, you simply cannot function in society. And the Supreme Court has ruled that everybody has to have a Social Security number. Your name has a number, and it is your Social Security number. It is one of the systems mentioned in Revelation as part of the Antichrist system of control in Revelation 13. And there's no question that no man might buy or sell save he that had the number of his name. Now, there are three parts to that system. You have the mark, or the name of the beast. If you work for the government, you have the name of the beast, or you will have a mark. There is a secret agenda for the Social Security Administration. In this document that we uncovered, they plan to have this thing ready to go by the year 2000, and they call it a strategic plan. And part of this plan is for newborn babies to receive their Social Security number at birth when you go into the hospital. And we know that that is a fact because we have interviewed people that have had newborns, and that's exactly what they're doing. All Social Security checks to be transferred by electronic deposit is another part of this system. The use of smart cards as national ID cards that have a full dossier on us. In other words, they're going to have computer chips that have your entire history in these little cards. This card can hold large amounts of data and is available for a multiple credit card, checkbook, medical, record card, or a bank card, or any other card that they deem that you will need. It will all be reduced to one card. They also want the increased use of data sharing by all government agencies, local, state, and federal, and world, so that there is a central information system that any of the authorities can tap into when they want to know about you. They also want to start video recordings of all transactions between citizens and the government. And they want this plan to be fully implemented by the year 2000. It's very interesting that your Social Security number has 9 digits, your zip code has 9 digits for 18, or comprised of 3 sixes, 6 plus 6 plus 6. Now, it is the plan of the international banking cartel to slowly gain total control over all mankind by these economic controls. And this conspiracy was laid down very, very carefully. He says, I can only tell that all of this is very much more serious than you think. The conspiracy which is being woven is so well thought out that it will be, so to speak, impossible for the monarchy or the church to escape from it. Now, this fellow went to one of the original meetings in which they laid down the plans for this conspiracy. And the Bible agrees that this is a conspiracy, as we will prove to you. A lot of Christians do not believe that there is a conspiracy. They think it's foolishness. But the Bible says emphatically that there is a worldwide conspiracy, and it is essentially against God, Jesus Christ, and against Jews and against Christians. There's a whole lot of other people included in this conspiracy too, but essentially it says in Psalm 2, why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. They get themselves together, you see. The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together. This is a conspiracy, and it's against the Lord God, and it's against his anointed, which is, of course, Jesus Christ. And what they want to do, they said, let's break their control over planet Earth. And this is really a plan to totally usurp Christ's right to rule planet Earth. James said that the rich men of the earth are the killers of the just. Therefore, the rich men of the earth are at the heart of this conspiracy. So therefore, it is no great thing when you start following the money trails how all of this ends up in the United States. Babylon the Great is the nation that is at the very heart of this conspiracy, for it is the center of world finance and world wealth. Now, when we say the center, we're talking about velocity of exchange. There's no other nation like the United States when it comes to this. Come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground, there is no throne. O daughter of the Chaldeans, thou shalt no more be called tender and delicate. This is a prophecy against the United States of America. We have a whole series of videotapes proving that the United States of America is in fact Babylon the Great, and it is called a nation. Here she is called the Lady of the Kingdom. She is the leading nation of the world. She leads in terms of exports, imports. She leads in terms of financial power, in military power, and her merchants are the great men of the earth. And throughout Scripture, she is called the Lady of the Kingdoms. In other words, she herself is a kingdom, and she is the queen of all of the kingdoms. But she weaves a web of deceit and gets trapped in her own web. And she is at the very heart of this conspiracy. And God is very emphatic about the trap that they set for the world and attempt to bring it to pass. And the whole system is forged by the merchants and the bankers of Babylon, the great men of the earth. Now you have to understand that this system takes a long time to develop. More than several hundred years are employed in the plotting of this system. This is not something that is done overnight. It is very, very carefully laid out by the planners, and it would have a web that would reach out over the whole earth and eventually bring it under total control. And the central hub of it all is the great city Babylon, and they will rule from their central headquarters, which we will prove to you is the United Nations. The United Nations is the son of the international banking cartels of the CFR, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderbergers, the Round Table groups, Cecil Rhodes, the entire groups of rich men, that gather together periodically and secretly to plot their next moves. And the United Nations is their instrument to bring this whole thing about. The international bankers and the merchants form a global government which they call a New World Order. You've probably heard Bill Clinton, George Bush, Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter, the Pope, many of the religious leaders are all calling for the United Nations to come to full power. Here is the great seal that's on the back of your dollar bill. It says Annuit Coeptus, which means announcing the birth. Norvis Ordo Seclorum means of a new secular order. Now, anything secular is of the world. So it means announcing the birth of a new world order. And they're doing it, we get back to this because it's so vital that you understand it, that the Antichrist system is first and foremost a system of finance. And it's the secret societies of the internationalists, the movers and the shakers, that actually bring all this about. The primary groups are your CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, TC, Bilderbergers, your leaders of your G7 nations, all belong to these groups, and they're all working very hard to bring it about. Now, the prophecies against Babylon the Great, which is the United States, prove that she is the center of world trade, she is the center of world banking, and she is the center for the drive for world government, and she is the center for world religion. And that's exactly what New York City represents, and that's exactly what the United Nations represents. For all the nations have drunken the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. In other words, there's a web that's woven that brings all nations into a state of interdependence upon one another, and the central hub is the United States of America, New York City, and the United Nations. The velocity of trade in America would exceed, or Babylon exceeds, all of the nations of the world. The velocity of monetary exchange exceeds all of the nations in the world. Her citizens live in luxury compared to other world nations. Her citizens enjoy a high standard of living. They are from all over the world. She has an aviation and space program that mounts up to heaven. She has a vast military system of high-tech weapons. She is a seacoast nation with many warm water seaports. She will have the largest seaport city in the Western Hemisphere. The largest seaport city will have within it, this seaport city will be the center of world finance, world trade, and it will have a tower that represents world government, a world religion identical to Nimrod's Babylon, in a system of world economic control. This is all part of Bible prophecy, and we're going through this very rapidly because there is so much to cover in this tape on the covenant. What we're trying to do here is simply lay the groundwork. You have to get the other series to dig into this whole thing and get the full scope of what they're doing. But Babylon the Great is identified as a nation which goes forth to conquer the entire world. Thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon, and say, how has the oppressor ceased, the golden city ceased? The Lord has broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers. He who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke, he that ruled the nations in anger. The king of Babylon, it says in Habakkuk 5, but gathering unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all peoples. That's verse 5, chapter 2 of Habakkuk. And a woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. And we're going to find out that that is a literal city, and that it is New York City. Behold, I am against thee, O destroying mountain, saith the Lord, which destroyeth all the earth. Is a prophecy against the United States of America. And one of the reasons you're seeing all the massive storms and all the problems that are engulfing America right now is we are under the judgment of God. Who is Babylon? Well, there are 140 parameters laid down by God to identify who she is, and it's only one nation, and one nation only. The scholars in the United States scoff, mock, and laugh when you tell them that the United States of America is Babylon the Great. But never will they go to scriptures. They always distort the scriptures. There are very few scholars in the United States that recognize and are warning the people that we are Babylon the Great. And my hat goes off to them because they are absolutely correct. The United States meets every single parameter laid down by the scriptures to identify not only the great city Babylon, but it identifies the United Nations as the entity Mystery Babylon and its religious operations as well as its financial operations. The doctrine of Babylon is all encompassing, but the United States of America is the nation that identifies Babylon the Great. There is nothing in which the United States does not meet the requirements. She is identified in the scriptures as a leading nation who has a tremendous military power. And we started to really forge our military power in World Wars I and II. And here you're seeing Department of Defense films of the massive numbers of bombers and technology that we developed in World War II to bring ourselves into a superpower status. And the United States has emerged as the primary superpower. What the Russians developed, they developed by stealing from us, essentially. And it was during World War II and after that the emphasis on military technology really came to the forefront. We went from those reciprocating B-17 heavy bombers to the jets that you see here on your screen, to the massive and formidable B-52s, which were used in Desert Storm and in Vietnam for what they call carpet bombing. And you can see they just unload tons of bombs upon the enemies. And the B-52 is still in use, although we have the B-1 and stealth bombers now. And we also have developed just tremendous helicopters, which are nothing more now than flying tanks. Very formidable weapons, of which nobody can stand against. We have a huge Navy and Navy power. The United States is portrayed as the leading military power in the world, and it uses this military might, it uses its technology to actually gain total control and dominance over the entire world. And we believe here at CIA that when you talk about the United Nations, you speak about America, and when you speak about America or Babylon, you're speaking about the UN. They're one and the same. Her people are tremendously bright, very talented. The Bible calls them dreadful and terrible, very, very powerful people in technology and in military capability. They're not only good merchants, they are also the greatest fighters in the world. And something goes wrong in Babylon, and evil men come into the system, and through the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, they gain control over our central banks, and the United States has grown progressively anti-Christ in its pronouncements and more leans upon the military power. And we also have weapons of which nobody knows about, UFOs. We've seen a lot of them. I used to fly airplanes. You'd see them quite frequently above 80, 90,000 feet, and you'd call radar and they would not know what it was. Well, we are testing weapons of which the general public has absolutely no concept of the advanced technology involved. The United States is portrayed as mounting up into the heavens. She goes up into the highest of the heavens and builds her nests, it says, among the stars. In other words, Babylon the Great, or the United States of America, is the leading high-technology power in the entire world. It leads the world in space exploration. It leads the world in aviation. It leads the world in merchandising. It leads the world in just about every field of endeavor. As we go in to the tribulation, however, America begins to fall, and she is robbed and raped and pillaged by the international bankers who set it up to do that because they intend to depopulate the United States. It's really a beautiful nation, a nation full of contrasts from the Niagara Falls, which you're looking at right now, to the cities that are in America. It's a beautiful country. And it's populated, according to the scriptures, by people who came from all over the world and came to America and set up the most powerful nation that the world has ever seen. And there will never be, according to the Bible, a nation as powerful as the United States. A nation that has such tremendous wealth. She has a fantastic railroad system for hauling freight, train system. She has an aviation system. She has a road system. She's essentially a merchandising and a pleasure-seeking people. In fact, God declares that the people are mad upon their idols. They're boating, airplanes, sports, hobbies. She's also portrayed as a harvesting nation. Her presidents are people who lead the American people. Here we have John Kennedy making a speech in which he declared that we were going to go to the moon and that nothing could stop us. That the challenge was there and we were going to accept that challenge and that we were going to make it work. And he's absolutely right. Anything that the American people decide they want to do, they simply go ahead and do it. Unfortunately, what happens in the United States is materialism takes over, and when it does, they fall away from the Bible, and then they go deep into spiritualism. The United States is the only nation in the world that fulfills all the parameters laid down by the prophets, both Old and New Testament. And there are many, many prophecies, which is why we have a tape series on there, which we explore each prophecy, each parameter very closely. America is Babylon the Great, and we hope you will receive that because it's essential to understand what is going on in New York City and in the United Nations. When you understand who America is, when you understand who the United States is in Bible prophecy, then all of the pieces of this puzzle start to come together and they all form this gigantic web that is central to the United Nations. And that's why the United Nations is being brought up to full power, and that is exactly why the United Nations is in the United States of America. Jesus Christ said, as it was, so shall it be. And in the days of Noah, well, Noah lived 350 years after the flood, and he saw the Babylonian system of Nimrod. It's very interesting that New York, when you add up her letters, comprise 666 if you use the Babylonian mathematical base of 6 on the English language. That's an absolute fact. You can prove it for yourself. And there is no question that the Babylonian mystery is right here in the United Nations. The United Nations is definitely an occult system. They have a meditation room. It is purely occultic, which we're going to explore later in this tape video series, and it's absolutely no question about it that it is the fourth beast of Daniel rising up, and that woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. That's a literal city. The great city called Mystery Babylon is New York City, and her number, surprisingly, or probably not surprisingly, is 666. And New York City is the leading nation in velocity of trade, not only in trading in commodities, but in stocks and in bonds. And New York, the New York Stock Exchange and the Amex Exchange are the leading exchanges in the world. If either one of them collapsed, the entire world economic system would collapse. Now, the word city means a literal city. Please don't read more into it than is there. It is a literal city. And that literal city, ladies and gentlemen, is New York City, the home of the United Nations, Babylon. And America does in fact have a secret destiny. This is a book written by Stanley Hall, and in there he makes some very interesting comments about the real destiny of the United States of America. He says about this shrine, which is the United Nations, to the universal truth shall rise the democratic commonwealth. The bankers intend to set up a world system, and it's going to be run from the United Nations. This plan, which was devised in secrecy long ago and in far places, shall be fulfilled openly as the greatest wonder born out of time. Now, those are very important remarks because he parallels what the Bible says, only he doesn't realize it. The beast that thou sawest was and is not shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and shall go into perdition, and they that dwell upon the earth shall wonder. Now he says it is the revival of this United Nations will be the greatest wonder, and they that dwell upon the earth shall wonder, says Revelation. Then he says born out of time, and the Bible says it shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. And this is, these fellows quote scripture, they just don't realize it. I can only tell you that all of this is very much more serious than you think, and it really is. This conspiracy is deadly serious, and the plan is to bring the United Nations up to full power, give it all the militaries of the world, so that nobody can come against it, and that is exactly what it says in Revelation. And you are watching the rise of the Antichrist system when you're watching and hearing about the United Nations on your television set. This book, written by Elizabeth Clare Prophet, called The White Brotherhood, has some very interesting things to say to this soil and this continent for the great gathering of the elect, and that's the occult elect, not the Christian elect. This is the destiny of America, to set forth that city foursquare that is the foundation of the ages, a new order of the ages. They intend to bring in the United Nations and set it up. It's the order of freedom, the order of the Aquarian age. And that's exactly what the leaders of the earth say when they take counsel against the Lord. Let us break their bands asunder. It's an order of freedom. They want to cast away any and all restraints that have ever been put upon them by ethics and the morality of the Christian faith. So it is the order of freedom and the order of the Aquarian age. And this is deadly because when they come to power, they really mean to do harm to millions of people, as we will prove to you. All right, this is from that same book, For the Destiny Given Unto This Nation, to hold the vision for all nations of the new order of the ages. I come as an instrument of the Godhead to place the capstone of the all-seeing eye upon the pyramid. I place it upon the pyramid of America. Indeed, the United States of America does have a secret destiny, which is why you have the Great Seal announcing the birth of a new world order on your dollar bill. It is a Masonic seal. It is an Illuminati symbol. It is a symbol of the secret societies, and the all-seeing eye is not the eye of Jesus Christ or God. It is the eye of Lucifer. President George Bush, in his speech to Congress, said, out of these troubled times, a new world order can emerge in which the nations of the world, east and west, north and south, can prosper and live in harmony today. The new world is struggling to be born. Now, this is President George Bush in a speech to Congress. These people are serious. They're going to do it, and the Bible says they're going to do it. We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. And when we are successful, and we will be, you see, they're very positive. This is President Bush, and he's saying we're going to be successful in bringing this whole thing about. They mean business. we have a real chance at this new world order in which a credible United Nations can be used to bring peacekeeping role. That's what it's for. They're bringing the United Nations up to full power to fulfill the promises and the vision of the UN founders. Well, they were the rich men of the earth, the communists. Had a great deal to do with the formation of the United Nations. The United Nations is a CFR, Trilateral, and Bilderberger organization behind the scenes. And the international bankers and the merchants marry together to form the most evil governmental control system upon earth. They speak of a one world government, and they want Lucifer to reign supreme. And we'll show you how this is true in the United Nations meditation room. This is serious business. In fact, it is so serious that you, listening to this, most likely are going to be killed by this system if Christ does not come back for his church. And this is what they mean when they say announcing the birth of a new world order. They intend to do it, and they intend to put Lucifer on the throne of it. And it's going to be done through the United Nations, which is being brought up to popularity. We the peoples of the United Nations. And here's a picture of the some things that we collected when we were there, and it's nothing more than propaganda, because they need the people's permission. The people are going to allow it to happen. This is a book called Global Tyranny, Step by Step, the United Nations and the Emerging New World Order. Excellent book. We highly recommend it. It was written by William Jasper. He's with the John Birch Society. We also wrote a book about it, A Warning for Americans, Babylon is Rising. And we said way back in 1988 that the rise of the United Nations was essential for this to come to pass. The CFR, comprised of the rich men of the earth, the merchants of Babylon, the great men of the earth, say the United Nations must be brought up to full power. And it's everywhere you go. Here are some arm patches we collected from NASA, showing how they're developing an entire web from outer space to the military to economics to food. They are going to absolutely control everything that is life. And if you go against it, they have plans for you. And those plans are your extermination. And we get into this in this series called The Covenant. And we will continue on the next part in just a few minutes. All right, now the United Nations has been engineered by the international banking cartel to be well presented. They've taken a lot of time to present this to the public in a way that the public would support it. And that's exactly what Daniel the prophet said. The words peace and love and brotherhood would make opposition to it to seem like you were against all of these things. And they wanted to get this through the Senate. The United Nations Charter, being accepted by the United States, was a key instrumental position. They had to actually accomplish this to make it work. And then they would bring the treaties in to follow. The United Nations exists by treaty power. And that is what makes it diverse from all other kingdoms in the world. It is not a state, it's not a nation. It exists through the power of treaties. And it will come. The international banking cartel knew it would come. It's just a question of how. Well, they were either going to do it through conquest or by consent. And they have done it through both. They have waged war in the name of peace. They stir up hatred to then step forward and say we need love. And they preach an intolerance in order to claim we need brotherhood. This is exactly how they do it. This is Robert Mueller. He was an assistant secretary, undersecretary to the United Nations, and has written many books on the UN and globalism. Let us all coalesce with all our strength, mind, heart, and soul around a new Genesis, a true global, God-abiding political, moral, and spiritual renaissance to make this planet at long last what it has always meant to be, the planet of God. Now, that is sheer blasphemy in the eyes of the Lord Jesus Christ, who said that this age is a very evil age and would result in the epitome of evil. Robert Mueller is a real heavy advocate of the New World Order. And he also wrote a new Genesis. And God saw that all nations of the earth, black and white, poor and rich, from north and south, from east and west, and of all creeds, were sending their emissaries to the tall glass house on the shores of the river. In other words, the United Nations is to become the focal point or the ruler of the entire world. And it sits on the shores of the river of the rising sun, which is a New Age term. They're Luciferian worshippers, or they worship the sun, light. And on the island of Manhattan to study together, to think together, and to care together for the world and its people. And God said that it is good, and it was the first day of the new age of the earth. They intend, ladies and gentlemen, to bring in a new world order. They're using the front of peace, love, and brotherhood. That's what Daniel the prophet said they would do. By peace he destroys many. Now, he also wrote, Robert Mueller, the 10 Commandments to all groups and institutions. Very important statements. The 7th commandment, you shall respect the United Nations Charter and unanimous rules, recommendations, and codes of conduct and ethics agreed to by humanity universally. The United Nations Charter, ladies and gentlemen, is a communist document. It is patterned after the Constitution of Russia, not the United States. You shall protect the sacred rights of the human person and obey the universal human rights injunctions of the United Nations. The United Nations is the instrument being brought up into full power to run the world. Make no mistake about it. It is in their writings, and they are doing it. And behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. That verse of Scripture, we're going to prove to you, is fulfilled in the United Nations, and only by the United Nations. It fulfills it completely. Daniel 7:23, thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down, and break it in pieces. And when he says this is the fourth beast, he is referring to the 4 beasts of Daniel, which began with England rising up and the United States. This diverse kingdom only lasts for a very short period of time. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom, which is a singular nation and a kingdom, are 10 kings that shall arise. There is a nation, a host nation, in which the United Nations, and that nation is the United States, is the host nation of the United Nations. And the United Nations, with the power of this host nation, goes forth and then divides the world into 10 kings. The word kingdom means empire or nation. So it's a singular nation in a singular kingdom, not a group of nations. Out of this nation, of this empire, this Antichrist power rises up that has 10 kings. Now we know that Babylon the Great goes forth to conquer the world because we saw those prophecies. And we know there cannot be 2 powers that go forth and conquer the world at the same time, only one. The conclusion, therefore, is quite obvious, is it not? That Daniel's 4th beast power must be Babylon the Great. We don't have any other options here for this. You cannot have 2 powers conquering the world at the same time. Either one conquers it or the other doesn't. Now, if the nation Babylon the Great goes forth to conquer the whole world, and if Daniel's 4th beast goes forth to conquer the world, then Daniel's beast has to be Babylon the Great. Therefore, the military power of the United States of America, under the United Nations will be used to bring the entire world into subjection and control. If America is Babylon, then America must also host the greatest military force in the world, for it cannot conquer without it. And that is an absolute fact. There is nothing that excels the United States military. There is nothing on earth that excels it. And after the coming war, in which the Russian military forces are annihilated, you better believe the United States military will be the only force on the world capable of doing what the prophets say it does. All right? Antichrist honors the God of forces, but in his estate shall he honor the God of forces, and a God whom his fathers knew not he shall honor. All right? Now the word forces actually means force or fortress or strength or a stronghold. It has two connotations. One is spiritual and one is material, and it involves the military. It is going to be a military power. And the prophecies in Revelation says that no one can make war with this beast that rises up, that has the 10 horns. And they worshiped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? The military might of the United States, which is giving all its power to the United Nations to enforce UN resolutions, is the entity that the prophecies long foresaw. And to make warfare means, i.e., to do battle against, to fight or to make war, or a series of battles. The king of Babylon honors the God of military power. His control is via the military. Now, there is a spiritual side of this, the occult force, which Star Wars talked about. But the primary method for control here is going to be via the military. It will use its vast military powers and its vast research and development and its weapons and weapon systems of the United States to enforce its dictates. The Antichrist system is therefore a martial law system. It's a military system, and it uses military police forces to control the populations. And if the population does not happen to like what the UN does, the people that do not like it will simply be declared enemies of the state, and they will be rounded up, imprisoned, made into slaves, or shot, which is exactly what Jesus Christ said was happening. This is real. This is a real document of the world government plan in which they intend to police the entire world with military forces. This is not your local sheriffs and sheriff deputies or your local police department. This is a military power. Excuse me. And it is done through military police. The United States is going to be patrolled by Belgian, Colombian, Venezuelan, and Russian troops predominantly. They will be under the United Nations peacekeeping forces, which we believe is one reason why National Guard armories are going up all over the United States to house and to be the location points and the detention centers for the people they intend to arrest when this thing goes into effect. We have been told through sources that there are over 23 million arrest warrants sitting in computers all ready to go when this thing finally comes to power, by which they can arrest, you see, the leaders of the opposition and therefore destroy the essential part of the opposition. All right, now, the United States published a document called Freedom from War, the United States Program for General Complete Disarmament in a Peaceful World, which was made into law in 1961. This document is law, ladies and gentlemen, and you're reading from the document itself. Christian scholars don't seem to be able to identify the United Nations, but I'll tell you something this document can. This can only be achieved, this world order, can only be achieved through the progressive strengthening of internal institutions under the United Nations and by creating a United Nations peace force to enforce the peace as the disarmament process proceeds. It is the intention of the United States, and it has already passed a law to bring the United Nations up into full power and to bring up a United Nations peacekeeping force. Now, this is exactly what the Bible said about Babylon the Great. Why cannot the people, the Christian scholars in America, understand what is going on? It's incredible the blindness that they have. And Antichrist, through his policy, causes occultism, craft to prosper. He magnifies himself, and by peace destroys many. In other words, he uses the platform of peace to wage war. He uses the platform of love to create hatred. And he uses the platform of brotherhood to create intolerance. He advances one to bring about the other. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. There is a covenant coming, ladies and gentlemen, and that covenant is an agreement not only with Israel and the Abrahamic covenant, it's a covenant with the world. This is a prophecy against the United States. For lo, I raise up the Chaldeans, that's America, a bitter and hasty nation, which shall march through the breadth of the land to possess dwelling places that are not theirs. America and the United Nations can be considered predominantly as one entity. Their horses also are swifter than the leopards and are more fierce than the evening wolves. Their horsemen shall spread themselves, and the horsemen shall come from far. They shall fly as the eagle that hasteth to eat. This is a world army, and they're doing it through the United Nations, but you will notice it is always the United States forces that is doing all the dirty work. There's a reason for it. They're using the U.S. military to do what they want to do. Clinton approves the U.S. Army. Reagan approved the U.S. Army. They have all advocated a UN standing army, and they want to integrate the United States into a new world order, placing U.S. troops under foreign command and eroding national sovereignty. They want to destroy the Constitution of the United States. The UN Army and UN spies are planned, and this is what the international banking cartels, the elite, have long sought for. They want to bring up the United Nations, give it a standing military force, and then they control the world. The UN is an instrument of the international banking cartel. If you will go back to the founding of the United Nations, you will find that members of the Council on Foreign Relations and the Bilderberger groups, which was formed later, all of the elite were in on this thing from the very, very beginning. The Somalia, U.S.-UN Somalia, is a precedent-setting situation whereby the United Nations, under the guise of threat to international peace, can invade a sovereign country, i.e. the United States, at will. All right, it's in accordance with Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter. All right, Yugoslavia, Bosnia, the situation, the Somalia situation. There are other situations that are going to come up. What is going on? Why are we in these places? Why did we go into Iraq? What was the real reason behind what we were told? Why are we in Kuwait, and why are we in the Saudi desert with military bases there? You'll notice Somalia is a warm water seaport, Persian Gulf, and the Bosnian situation all are very close to water. All right, what we are doing is the old military tactic of triangulation. We are encircling an area of the world which is our real goal. Remember that the goal of Lucifer, of the Antichrist, is to sit upon the throne in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount. That's the goal. And therefore we're getting our bases and our military power and our aircraft positioned for also what they believe to be the coming war. There is going to come a war between Syria and Israel. That war is going to be a very, very nasty war, and in all indications and probabilities, nuclear. And it's going to spread worldwide. We hope it doesn't. We hope we're reading those prophecies wrong and it's a localized war. But even so, you better believe that the United States will be involved. The burden of Damascus. Behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city. It shall be a ruinous heap. Damascus is the oldest known city in the world that has never been destroyed in that manner. And it is going to be destroyed. And God says, at that day, when that happens, shall man look to his Maker, and his eyes shall have respect to the Holy One of Israel. This is in Isaiah chapter 17. It collates to Ezekiel 38 and 39. In that day, the Arabs will be driven out of their cities because of the children of Israel. There shall be desolation. It's all because they forgot who God was. Woe to the multitude of many people, which make a noise like the noise of the seas, to the rushing of the nations, that make a rushing like the rushing of many waters. The nations shall rush like the rushing of many waters. Everybody rushes into the Middle East to protect either their treaties or their strategic rights. Everybody's going to go in there to get their piece of the pie. And God says, whoa, wait just a minute. You shall not do this. And the United Nations and the United States is going to be all the way into this thing up to their eye teeth. And we believe it'll be the United States and the United Nations combined that bring about the peace agreement, long spoken of by Daniel the prophet. All right, this document, Freedom from War, they bring war up to advance the cause of freedom by creating wars and hatred and intolerance and all the dissension. Then they can step forward and they can say, see, we have all this, we need peace, love, and brotherhood. And this is how they get their objectives. All right? What they want to do is to disarm completely under effective international control in a world in which adjustments to change take place in accordance with the principles of the United Nations Charter. The disbanding of all national armed forces and a prohibition of their reestablishment in any form whatsoever other than those required to preserve internal order and for contributions to the United Nations peace force. Ladies and gentlemen, this is law. It is the object of the law to bring the United Nations up. Measures should be taken to develop and strengthen United Nations arrangements. That's what you're hearing about on the TV all the time, how we need the UN brought up. This is exactly in fulfillment of the prophecies of Daniel and the fourth beast. States would be committed to refrain from the threat or use of any type of armed force contrary to the principles of the UN Charter and to refrain from indirect aggression and subversion against any country. A UN peace observation group would be available to investigate any situation which might constitute a threat to or breach of peace. Establishment of a permanent international peace force within the United Nations. You see, this is what they want to do, and they've made it a law. Public Law 287, they're going to do it. States would retain only those forces, non-nuclear armaments, because the UN holds all the nuclear armaments, and establishments required for the purpose of maintaining internal order. They would also support and provide agreed-upon manpower to the UN. You see, it's all a UN peace force. UN peace force required to maintain internal order. All other armaments would be destroyed or converted to peaceful purposes. Peacekeeping capabilities of the United Nations would be sufficiently strong to ensure peace throughout the world. It's exactly what the Bible said. Who can make war with the beast? This was an incredibly diabolical plan in which they would rise up Russia, pit Russia against America, get both countries into an arms race, and then in the end, take the arms that were developed and give them to the United Nations to control the world with it. All right? The United Nations is supposed to be brought up to the end that the United Nations can effectively, in Stage 3, deter or suppress any threat or use of force in violation of the purposes and principles of the United Nations, the UN Charter. States will agree upon strengthening the structure. We already did. Public Law 287. That's what it's for. All right? Foreign Affairs magazine. This is put out by the Council on Foreign Relations. Very, very instrumental and powerful in the United Nations. Empowering the United Nations is one of their key articles in their latest journal. You're watching this spoken of on TV all the time, bringing in the United Nations. This is a pamphlet from the Baha'i faith, and it's Baha'i peace program. And we believe, after looking at this, that this is the actual blueprint they're using. They want the rulers and the kings of the earth to get together to form a world great peace among men. They want them to get together to form a covenant. And that's exactly what Daniel the prophet says, a covenant with many. The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their bands asunder, cast away their cords from us. This is the Antichrist movement. They wish to get rid of Jesus Christ and his rightful claim to the throne of planet Earth. And Antichrist is going to come in his place. And the whole world was of one language and one speech. This is back in the days of Nimrod. This is the first Babylon. And they said, let us build us a city and build us a tower whose top may reach unto heaven. If you read United Nations documents, we have the second great Babylon. And the UN building is the great tower, Babel. And they want to reach into heaven. And they openly state that that's what their purposes are, if you just read their documents. Again, their peace plan said, should any king take up arms against another, all would unitedly arise and prevent him. Well, this is exactly what the purpose of the United Nations is. Only they're going to go one step further and give over all of their armies to the United Nations peacekeeping forces. And that's what that map was for the policing of the world. All right, they must make the cause of peace the object of general consultation and seek by every means in their power to establish a union of the nations of the world. That's what the United Nations is. They must conclude a binding treaty and establish a covenant, the provisions of which to be sound, inviolable, and definite. They must proclaim it to all the world. That's exactly what Daniel the prophet said. They make a covenant with many. If you will look into Psalm 94, you will find a reference to the signing or the bringing forth of this covenant. Shall the throne of iniquity, or Satan's seat, the UN, have fellowship with thee, which frameth mischief by a law? Now, the word law is very interesting. It means resolution, covenant, or a legally binding agreement. They gather themselves together against the soul of the righteous and condemn the innocent blood. That's exactly what the rich men of the earth have in mind. They're going, when they come to power, when they finally get to the power, they will destroy the Christians. The kings of the earth set themselves against the God and against Christ. That's what this is all about. And unto the wicked God saith, what hast thou to do to declare my statutes, or that thou shouldest take my covenant in thy mouth? This is a reference to the Abrahamic covenant, which is a part of the overall peace agreement worked out by the Antichrist forces. All right? They are speaking evil, and they frame deceit. This entire system of the United Nations and this world government is a deception against the peoples of the world. And as soon as they come to power, they are going to murder and roll back millions upon millions of people. It's in their documents, ladies and gentlemen. They have openly said they will do it. They feel that they are doing what God wants them to do. Thou thoughtest that I was altogether such as one as thyself. All right? But this is not what God wants. Some form of a world superstate must needs to be involved. Such a state will have to include within its orbit an international executive adequate to enforce supreme and unchallengeable authority on every recalcitrant member of the Commonwealth, a world parliament. George Bush called the United Nations the World Parliament. We believe the Baha'i faith documents ought to be studied by Christians because everything that they have mentioned in there is actually happening. A world federal system ruling the whole earth and exercising unchallengeable authority. All right? Is that not what Revelation said? Who can make war with the beast? No one. It does exercise unchallengeable authority because it has the weapon systems and the military of Babylon the Great. The United States military forces are going to be the primary forces used to bring the entire world into subjection. It's one of the reasons why you're seeing military forces being used in the United States more and more commonly. We're going into a martial law system beyond national sovereignty. A Baha'i faith document, UN pictured right on the front cover. Very interesting. And this is exactly what is happening. World peace through a new world order. Is that not what it says? Announcing the birth of a new world order on our own currency? The American nation is equipped and empowered to accomplish that which shall adorn the pages of history, to become the envy of the world, and to be blessed in both East and West for the triumph of its people. It will lead all nations spiritually. It will do more than just lead them spiritually. It will lead them with military force. All right, Elizabeth Clare Prophet, if America prove the law that is the foundation of her life, it will mean that every nation and every world and every system of worlds can do the same. How America was set up and structured is to be set up and structured throughout the world. This is the front they're using. However, what it is, in reality, is dictatorial socialism. And so America is the motherland come again, founded by the brotherhood on the matrix of the original 13 of Christ and his apostles, as the fulfillment of the destinies of the peoples of Lemuria and Atlantis. That's all New Age occult information. Over 4 centuries they have journeyed to the place prepared in the wilderness for the coming of the woman, clothed with a son, and the birth of her divine man-child. They're taking this is a perversion of Revelation chapter 12. The culture, the history, and the religion of America is part of the Great White Brotherhood. This is a system set up by the Great White Brotherhood. For by unseen hand and the very specific guidance of the ascended masters, America, the heart, the mind, and the soul of the world was born. In other words, the cult has long known that America had a secret destiny, and it was to bring in and prepare the way for the second coming of the Christed One. Well, the Christed One is not Jesus Christ. It's the Antichrist, Lucifer. This is the destiny of America, to set forth the city foursquare. All right? America's place in the destiny of the cosmos comes to the fore under the influence of the hierarchy of Aquarius. The Aquarian Age is a New Age term, and it is reigned over by Lucifer, the Antichrist, or Satan himself in disguise. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, has become the habitation of devils, the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, the United States of America will become the center of all Antichrist forces. And that great seal says, announcing the birth of a new world order. It says secular, but a secular order is a world order. It's not of God. It is a material order. Here is an official document published by our State Department, U.S. 3-stage disarmament plan, where they are bringing in the United Nations as they bring down the U.S. forces. Okay, but they intend to use them as internal security forces. It's a military program, ladies and gentlemen, not sheriffs, not police, but military police. A martial law system in which the United Nations peacekeeping forces go out and control the entire world under a martial law system. I want you to understand what martial law means. It means you have no rights whatsoever. The only rights you have are the rights to obey the dictates of the United Nations. You will not have property rights. You will not have job rights. You will do what you are told, or you are going to be rounded up, declared an enemy of the state, put in a detention center, or killed. That is what is in the offering, and it's in the immediate offering if God continues to allow this to happen, and the prophecies against Babylon say, yes, they will happen. He is not going to stop it, and he's not going to stop it because the American people rejected Jesus Christ, and they rejected God the Father. And it all starts here. And this is where it comes home to roost, the great city Babylon, the United Nations. All right? So we're back to the freedom of war. And that document was made into public law by Public Law 87-297. If I said 287, excuse me, it's Public Law 87-297. It was passed in 1961, making that document, Freedom from Peace, or Freedom from War, the actual plan. This is the stated plan to bring the UN up into full power. So who can make war with him? You're seeing prophecy fulfilled before your very eyes. All right? The Antichrist system is therefore a martial law system, a system where enforcement of law is done by a military police force, a system totally alien to the Constitution of the United States. And I hope you realize what that means, because it means the Constitution has to go. And this also means that if America is Babylon the Great, we would see the U.S. military, including the National Guards, taking a more active role in policing Americans in spite of constitutional prohibitions to the contrary. Posse Comitatus rules, prohibits this sort of thing, but they're doing it more and more. Every time there's a problem now, they're calling out the National Guard, and they're doing it to get people conditioned to a military police force. And Clinton has called for 100,000 American police force, not local police departments, but a federal police force. It is just another step to the burning of the Constitution of the United States, and they swear to uphold this Constitution, but they work day and night to circumvent it. And there are many senators and congressmen who are going to pay a dear, dear price for what they have done, because they have committed high treason against the people of the United States, against this Constitution. They have committed high treason against God and Jesus Christ. They are murdering their own neighbors. The Ten Commandments was written, remember, by Undersecretary General of the United Nations, and it says, you shall respect the United Nations Charter. We're going to go under the United Nations Charter, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to lose the Constitution of the United States. They're calling a constitutional convention. If they can get it through that way, they'll do it. If they can't get it through that way, they'll declare an emergency, and we'll go into FEMA. FEMA is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and it has a hidden agenda. And it is interlocked with the U.S. military and further with NATO and the United Nations through the charters. FEMA's hidden agenda is to bring the United States under a declared emergency, which removes us from the Constitution and places us under executive orders, and these executive orders suspend every part and parcel of the United States Constitution. Their motto is very strange: peace and war, earned or deserved, which is a very odd thing. Here you're seeing the interrelationship between FEMA and NATO Canada. This is from their own document called NEMS, how they're set up. FEMA was set up by executive orders. Under these orders, the United States is divided up into 10 federal regions in accordance with UN directives for the regionalization of the world, and it's under Articles 52, 55, and 56 under the UN Charter, which is why you're seeing states and whatnots, when they rewrite the constitutions, they're leaving off their borders, their descriptions of their borders, because we're going into regions. The powers that have infiltrated all levels of government know exactly what's going on. The only thing they don't realize is when the United Nations comes to full power, every one of these people that helped them come to power is going to be executed. They always execute those that help them to come to power. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down, and break it in pieces. All right? It's diverse because it operates by treaty power, and no other entity upon the face of the earth has ever done what the United Nations does, and it breaks the world into pieces. This is what happens under FEMA. We have been broken down into 10 federal regions. All right? Furthermore, each of the states is broken down into sub-regions. It's all been very carefully plotted out. These are real charts, and these are not made up. This is real documentation that anybody can get a hold of that wants to look at it. The United Nations regional method of operating the United States of America under world control. California is in transition. Ohio has 15 federal regions. They're doing this in every state. You may know about it if you live near a city as Metro. What is going on is we had an elected representative system. The U.S. Constitution and the companion state constitutions formed the Republic, and it was run by the people. But under this system, the United Nations Charter of Regional Arrangements is a dictatorship because there is no voting. These people are appointed to rule. There is absolutely no vote in any of this. Then they subdivide this thing down into a grid system, and that grid system goes down to 10 square yards of every Earth's surface is plotted and put into computers, and they can tell exactly what's going on with orbiting satellites. This whole system is a precise fulfillment of what Daniel said. They devour the whole earth, they tread it down, they break it into pieces, and the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise. This is a double reference prophecy. First, to the 10 federal regions, each run by a king, and secondly, to the 10 bioregions of the world, which have been set up by the Club of Rome under the auspices of the United Nations. They intend to divide the world. This is an actual world chart, and the United States is number one because the United States is the number one power, and the United States is the entity responsible for bringing it about. Number two is the EC. That's why the EC is coming together. The United States, the EC, and Japan form the trilateral group of nations, the richest and wealthiest nations of the world. Remember, it's the rich men of the earth that do this, and that's why we have them numbered sequentially in that manner. Number 4 is Australia. This thing is very real, ladies and gentlemen. They are dividing the entire world into these regions. The breakup of the Soviet Union was really the formation of region number 5. And you're going to see these breakups all over the world as we enter into the final phase of this New World Order. And then shortly thereafter, Jesus Christ returns and puts down this entire program. And people are working night and day, very deceived. Men and women are working night and day to make sure that this thing comes about. They are very deceived because they do not realize that those people who helped in this thing are not going to be rewarded. If you commit high treason against the Constitution of the United States after you have taken a sworn oath, believe me, the world order people know you cannot be trusted, and you will simply be eliminated. What we're showing here is the interior of the United Nations meditation room, and that's a very interesting room because in that room are 10 lights and 10 chairs and 10 railings, all of which we believe are where the 10 kings will actually rule from. The UN room, meditation room, is dedicated to the God whom man worships under many names and in many forms. Now, Jesus Christ said that he was the only name under heaven by which anybody could be saved. And so this is, of course, an explicit denial of Jesus Christ, who said he was the only way and the only anointed one. And the world says, no, Jesus Christ didn't really understand who he was. There are many different ways to heaven. Well, I am here to tell you that if you will study Scripture, you will find out. And now here it says, the kings of the earth set themselves against Christ. And that's exactly what they've done. They have set themselves against Christ. All right? John said that he was carried away, and he saw a beast having 7 heads and 10 horns. The 10 kings of the UN building. It's also interesting to note that the UN building itself is subdivided into 10 main structures. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom of yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the United Nations. When the United Nations finally comes up to power, there will be 10 kings. And these have one mind and give their power and strength unto the United Nations. All right, and the military power of the United States and the UN is behind it all. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city. It's a literal city which reigns over the kings of the earth. It is a literal city. Don't read into this something else. It is a literal city, New York City, which is why America and the North American continent is number 1 in the bioregions of the world. So we have 10 kings rise up out of America, and we have the UN rise up out of America, and then we have the UN install 10 kings throughout the world. And they in turn divide the world up into tiny pieces so that they can pinpoint 10 square yards from a satellite, which is going to be used with their laser weaponry. They are developing laser weaponry through mirrors that are in outer space. You might have heard about it already, the mirrors that were deployed by the Soviet Union, and they were bouncing some light off onto the Earth. And in reality, what this thing is for is the final setting up of what the Revelation talked about. He maketh fire to come down out of heaven. Through computers, they will be able to take a laser beam, bounce it off mirrors, and bring it back to an exact pinpointed system on the grid system. And that is essentially what this is all for. The grid system they're setting up changes all the addresses of the American people. We just had our address changed here. Again, we had a republic. We're going into a martial law dictatorship ruled from the great city in New York City from the United Nations. A fantastic fulfillment of biblical prophecy, already legislated into law. Why cannot the American prophetic scholar see this? All right, FEMA is, getting back to FEMA, is a military operation predominantly. It does have civil functions that are legitimate, but there is a hidden agenda here, as you can see from their exercises. These are military exercises that they are doing. All right, they hold 22 secret draft executive orders, which are held for immediate enactment. Plan D is a top secret 364-page document detailing U.S. response in times of emergency. And these plans provide the basis for the deployment and employment of military resources, including National Guard personnel who are called for use in civilian disturbance operations. They know that the people of the United States of America are going to, when they find out about this, rise up in opposition. The military is ready and waiting for it to happen through FEMA, which declares a martial law police state. These are executive orders you're seeing. Read them. It's incredible. These are law, ladies and gentlemen. They have been enacted. They have been updated. These are the older ones, but if you will go down and research this out in a large federal or local library that has all the federal codes, you will find out that FEMA, through the executive orders, is a total confiscation of all property and all rights that you and I hold under the Constitution. What this is an in-run around the Constitution. If they cannot get it through the Constitutional Convention, which I think may be coming, in which they will replace the Constitution we now have with a new Constitution, or merely put us under the UN Charter, they are going to get this done, and they are going to burn the United States Constitution. We are in the very last phases of this. We are under the judgment of God for God and Christ rejection. Under FEMA, they term an emergency any accidental, natural, man-caused, or wartime emergency or threat which cause or may cause substantial injury or harm to the population or damage to or loss of property. In other words, if there's a riot, they can bring in FEMA. It's already made into the law. Ladies and gentlemen, our Constitution doesn't even mention the word emergency. The rich men of the earth must take the United States. They must get around the Constitution. They are evil, wicked people. They are run by a demonic spirit, Satan himself. It is a move towards total dictatorship under direct United Nations control, because all commands and all directives are issued by the United Nations. And they break the world into these pieces, they restructure it, and they bring in their new world order. It's going to happen. It's going to happen because Jesus Christ says it's going to happen. What's going to happen in the United States is a judgment of God. We have some headlines here. We'll let them speak for themselves. that Jesus Christ said, "They shall deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake." The plot is against Jesus Christ, against God the Father and his people. "And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall persecute or wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws." They're going to change all the times and celebrations that we are so familiar with, and they're going to change all the laws. They're going to throw out the Constitution and come in with a whole brand new system. "And they that understand among the people shall instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword, by flame, by captivity, by spoil, many days." They're going to be killed. God's people know what the truth is, and the American people, because they don't even bother to read the scriptures, don't have the faintest idea what is coming. And the vast majority of them are going to go into this thing only to find out what a terrible thing it was. "And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished." It is God's will that this new world order come into being because of mankind's rebellion, and he casts upon them a grand delusion. And then, after they are dead, they stand before the throne of God to find out that they are lost forever and are going to a terrible place that they can never get out of. If no one can make war with this system, then this system has to have the most advanced weapon systems in the world. The United Nations will retain all of the nuclear armaments. Undoubtedly, it will not necessarily move them. It may just set up strategic places in the world from which it can hit any nation that doesn't do its bidding, and could eliminate it if it chose to do it. Remember, Babylon the Great is a high-tech weapon. When we speak UN, think of the U.S., because the two concepts are married scripturally. They develop fantastic weapon systems, from stealth fighters and stealth bombers to pinpoint bombing accuracy. Their research and development of weapons is tremendous. There is virtually no weapon they cannot come up with. And the ultimate weapon, we believe, will be the laser weapons, which through mirrors mounted in satellites above the earth, they can, with pinpoint accuracy, destroy any target upon earth they choose. They can simply burn it up, of which the people on earth will have no means of being able to resist it. Through a couple touches of the button, they can eliminate any portion of the earth they wish with pinpoint accuracy. They could take out my own personal house just simply through computers and using the 911 grid system that they are setting up in all nations. The United States is therefore, or Babylon the Great, is a high-tech power, and it is the leader of high-tech weapons development. And the United States of America fulfills that role more than any other nation in the world. We got a taste of that in the Iraqi situation. Americans sat around their TV sets watching in awe as they saw the weaponry that we used to take Iraq down to total humiliation. But remember, what goes around comes around. And what we did to Iraq, the United Nations will do to the American citizens if they do not agree to go into this new world order. The rich men of the earth form it. Now, one of the parameters against Babylon is that though Babylon would mount up into the heavens, this is literal, it means exactly what it says, though Babylon should mount up into the heavens, and though she should fortify the height of her strength. That's kind of like Star Wars technology and fighters and bombers and satellites. She fortifies the height of her strength, yet God is going to destroy Babylon the Great. And he does it with infiltration of people across the borders that are going to rise up in the very near future and take her down. The American people are about to enter into the final phase of God's judgment. The United States of America, the technology of its people, the intelligence of its people is fantastic. The American people, General MacArthur said, are the greatest fighters in the world. They're gentle people by and large. The Bible calls them terrible but it's not in reference to their being evil so much as it is of their ability to defend themselves, to make war. They're very peaceful people, by and large. But they abandoned Jesus Christ. They abandoned God the Father. And they instead opted for material possessions and to defend themselves with high-tech weapons. They came to the conclusion that through weapons alone they could, and yet God says, I'm going to destroy you. If you have God on your side, you can't lose. But if God is against you, no matter what weapons you have, you will lose. And so Babylon would mount into the very stars, and yet she shall be brought down. The United States of America is now under the judgment of God, and we have a video about that, and she is going to be brought down totally and burned with fire from one end to the other. We believe the burning of Babylon is not very far off, because we are going under the United Nations very, very soon. We believe 1993 and 1994 are key pivotal years for this all to happen. Now, James says that the rich men are the killers of the just, and do they use America to rise to full power in the nation Babylon? That's what the Scripture says. It is Babylon the Great that brings the world under subjection and puts it under her rule through the United Nations. So we have Somalia. We have Iraq, which we humiliated. We have now Bosnia coming up, in which we will be there through the UN police-keeping forces, but it'll be American forces. We did things to Libya, all right? But the ultimate goal, remember, of Lucifer is not the United Nations, but it is the city of Jerusalem. He wants to rule where Jesus Christ rules. He wants to rule from the Temple Mount. He wants to sit upon the congregation, and he wants to sit on the sides of the north. He wants to sit in the Holy of Holies in this temple of God. The secret destiny of America is to introduce Lucifer to the world. It is the gathering of the elect, of the occult, the Freemasons, the Illuminati, and all other world religions that reject Jesus Christ as the only way to heaven. And this is exactly what Revelation says. Babylon the Great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. America becomes the center of all Antichrist religions, of all Masonic and Illuminist movements. America goes totally demonic, from its corporations to its governmental leadership, from its military to its teachers, to its children, to the population. America goes under the influence of demons. Now, the king of Babylon, or the king of America, when he gets to rise up to full power, is called Lucifer. Thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon, and say, How has the oppressor ceased, the golden city ceased? How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God, I will sit upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. If you take a look at the UN emblem, it is from the position of the far north, looking down upon the planet at the North Pole. And it also has a reference to the Temple Mount, the Mount of the Congregation, which is the most holy of places in the economy of God. And if you think God, the real God of this universe, is going to allow the Antichrist sit in the Holy of Holies, you're surely mistaken. That is the last act that Lucifer does before God destroys the United States of America, or Babylon the Great. All right, he says he's going to exalt his throne above the stars of God. And he's going to do it by entering into the Temple Mount. That's his goal. That's what he wants to do. He wants to totally usurp the right of Jesus Christ to come back and rule this planet. That's what this whole thing of the rich men of the earth is really about. Behind it all, although they use the power of money to bring it all about, behind all of that is a spirit of Antichrist, and to usurp the right of Christ. And Lucifer is called a man. Is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms? He is a man, and he is inhabited by Lucifer, or Satan himself. Lucifer is in reality Satan in disguise. The United Nations is being brought up to this position of world rule. All right, now John said that he was taken out and he was going to be shown the mystery of the woman. It had 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was and is not and shall ascend. It was historical, but it was not in the time of Rome where John was when he had his vision, but yet it shall ascend. And the beast was and is not and yet is. All right, this is a historical evidence. The 7 heads are 7 mountains. And mountains always equals nations or kingdoms, and there are 7 kings. 7 heads equals 7 nations, equals 7 kings, equals 7 mountains. They're all the same. Revelation 17:8, the beast that thou sawest was, past tense to John, who lived during the days of the Roman Empire. And this is what this is telling you. And is not during the days of the Roman Empire, and shall ascend in the far distant future out of the bottomless pit. Now the beast existed prior to the Roman Empire. A beast is a government, a nation. A nation existed prior to Rome that is not during the days of Rome, and yet will ascend in the far, far future. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this excludes the Roman Empire as being the beast. Everybody says it's Rome, it's Rome. No, it is not Rome. It has nothing to do with Rome. The beast will be revived in the far future. The beast was. And then in the days of Rome, the beast is not. And yet in the far distant future, the beast will ascend. A nation that existed prior to Rome will ascend again. And there are 7 kings or kingdoms. 5 of these kingdoms have fallen. That's past tense or historical to John. And one is, John lived during the Roman Empire, so Rome is obviously one of the kingdoms that is, and the other is not yet come. Who is it? The beast was. At one time the beast existed. 5 kingdoms have fallen. Which kingdom among the 5 was the beast? Because a beast is always a kingdom or a nation. All right, let's take a look at it so we understand it. 5 kingdoms have fallen. One is, which is Rome, and the beast one of the beasts that have fallen will arise. All right, now what empires had to do with Israel in the ancient past before Rome? Assyria, Egypt, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece. Syria, Egypt, Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece all play a very important role with Israel. And one of those kingdoms, John said, will be revived. Which one? Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, the abominations of the earth. For review, then, the United Nations is being brought up to a position of world rule. You have seen the documents, and it is to rule over all the nations, and its religion is in reality the religion of ancient Nimrod. The United Nations must be able to mount collective efforts to enforce peace under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. Its members must be ready to deploy combat-ready troops. By peace, this system destroys many nations. And that's why the headlines that you're seeing in your newspapers about UN armies, the calls for a standing army from Bush, from Reagan, from Clinton, from the Pope, from all sources, even from corporate leaders and other political leaders and religious leaders. It's being called upon to have a standing army. The United Nations is located in New York City, which is the great city Babylon. It fulfills all the parameters for Babylon the Great. And the United Nations fulfills all of the written stuff of the occult. They have with one accord said they would bring it up. Here is wisdom, let him that has understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. And if you take New York and you apply the mathematical Babylonian system to it, you arrive at the number 666. This is just one more aspect of the number 666. The Trilateral Commission has 3 sixes embedded within those arrows, an upside-down cross and a pyramid. The World Future Society is 3 sixes arranged in a circle. The number 666 is going to become predominant because God said it would be. Under FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, then, we go under martial law, and we have our nation divided into 10 regions, each with a king reigning over it, or a ruler. And this is the start of the new laws and the changeover, we believe, within the United States, which puts the United States under the United Nations and a martial law system. The United Nations then in turn divides the world into 10 bioregions called kingdoms, and they are run by 10 kings out of the United Nations. And we have shown you the map, and here it is again, showing this. The United Nations exists through treaty power. It is not a sovereign nation. It is not a nation at all. It is not a state. It is an entity by treaty only, excuse me, and it is diverse from all other nations on the earth. It's diverse from all historical precedents that have ever gone before. There has never been anything like the United Nations upon the face of the planet Earth from the time of recorded history. And this is a direct fulfillment of Daniel the prophet. Thus he said, the fourth kingdom shall be the fourth kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms. And the United Nations is absolutely diverse from any nation or any state or any sovereign kingdom. And this United Nations, it says, shall devour the whole earth, shall tread it down, and then restructure it by breaking it into tiny administrative regions. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise. And this is the situation whereby when the United Nations finally comes to power and restructures the world, it will install 10 kings. It is my firm belief that the 10 kings already are operating behind the scenes. It's just not known yet. The United Nations shall rise just as the phoenix. Now the phoenix is a bird of the occult, and it rises out of the ashes of the old world order and brings about the new world order. If you go to the United Nations and look at the Security Council room, you'll find the picture of the phoenix right there, and here's a close-up of it. And there is the phoenix bird. Phoenix bird is symbolized in many different ways, but that is the phoenix bird, and it is in the United Nations Security Council room. And it's a key occult symbol which further verifies everything we have seen. The United Nations shall rise exactly like that. We had this phoenix bird on the cover of our book, Babylon Rising. This book, by the way, was banned from all Christian media. We couldn't even advertise it on Christian radio or get it into Christian bookstores because it identified America as the primary power of the Antichrist system, and they just couldn't stand to hear that. There's a lot of censorship in the Christian media. Sovereign, this is a letter from Albert Pike in which he maintains that the Luciferian doctrine is the key of the Freemasonry system. They worship Lucifer, you see. They admit to it. In their own writings, they admit to it, that it is Luciferian in its nature. It is a religion. They try to claim it is not, but it is. They believe that Lucifer, or Satan, and Lucifer and God are locked in mortal combat. To them, Lucifer is the god of good, and Jesus Christ and God the Father are God of evil. And I saw and behold a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. That white horse you just saw in that emblem is from the Council on Foreign Relations. It is their symbol. And here is a man on a white horse, and he's got his arm up in the form of the horns of Satan. It's on their Foreign Affairs book, which the Council on Foreign Relations publishes 5 times a year. It's very odd that that symbol is there, and the Council on Foreign Relations had an awful lot to do with the engineering and rise of the United Nations. And lo and behold, on the United Nations grounds, this is a video we took while we were at the United Nations, and here is the horse with a bow in his hand. That bow is really an olive branch, but look at the way it's shaped. It looks like a bow and arrow, and that's exactly without any arrows. And that's exactly what it says in Revelation. A rider on a horse with a bow with no arrows. And we feel this is a direct fulfillment of the prophetic words, because the Council on Foreign Relations has a white horse, and that white horse sits there on the grounds of the UN. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, and I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. He wants to usurp Christ's position as King of kings and Lord of lords. He wants to be the supreme ruler of planet Earth. The United Nations emblem, as you saw, looks down upon the earth from the north. That's exactly in fulfillment of that prophetic stance of Isaiah. The communist Soviet Empire's emblem looks down upon the earth from the north, and the emblem of the planetary citizens. They all look down from the sides of the north, and that is exactly what the Bible said that Lucifer wants to do. See, the people that make up these emblems have no idea that they are fulfilling biblical prophecy, but they are. And the end result, this is an ink drawing that we made showing the Temple Mount, and the Temple Mount actually will be where that arrow is, and he will want to go into the Holy of Holies and take the place of God in the Holy of Holies. And Jesus spoke of this when he said, when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. And that is when Lucifer actually goes upon the Temple Mount and declares himself God. And he shall plant the tabernacle of his palace between the seas and a glorious holy mountain. And this Antichrist, or Lucifer, opposes the king of Babylon, opposes and exalteth himself above all that is called God, all that is worshipped, so that he as God sits in the temple of God, showing himself he is God. Now the connection between the UN and the United States, the eagle of the Great Seal of the United States, is in reality the phoenix bird, the very bird that you saw in the Security Council room of the United Nations. The banner of the phoenix means out of many one. One meaning for the USA, out of many people, one nation. And then it has another meaning for the world, which means out of all the peoples of the world, one ruler. And it's out of many nations, one sovereign world power. And guess who it is? It's Antichrist, Lucifer. That is the occult meaning of the symbol of the United States of America. And the capstone of the bringing in of the New World Order, the all-seeing eye is the eye of Lucifer, or Baal, and he will be enthroned, and that will complete the order of the ages, and he will usher in the golden age. The time will come when the white stone, which is Lucifer, will become the headstone of the corner of our government in proclaiming a new religion. See, this is Antichrist, in which all spiritual currents flowing from every religion shall meet in perfection of the white stone. In other words, all religions are all aim at the same thing. They all worship God. This is the destiny of America, to set forth the city foursquare that is the foundation of the new order of the ages, the order of freedom, the order of the Aquarian age. It is a gathering together of the elect of the occult. It is Antichrist to the core. The American nation is equipped and empowered to accomplish that which will adorn the pages of history, to become the envy of the world, and to be blessed in both East and West for the triumph of its people, and it will lead all nations spiritually. That's what the Baha'i faith has to say about it. Now, the Temple of Understanding is the gathering of all the religions of the earth unto Babylon, the gathering of the elect. The Temple of Understanding is quite important. It ties into the United Nations room. It is dedicated to the God whom man worships under many names and in many forms. And here is the Temple of Understanding, and the way it is set up, it's set up in a circle, and it's the same concept of the UN meditation room. It's identical. And here is your circle in which all the religions of the world have their temples, and they all meet at the center. That's Antichrist to the core. Jesus Christ is the only way. All the other religions in the world are Antichrist, and God called them that. Well, mankind cannot stand the exclusivity of the message of Christ. The outer message of the United Nations is peace. The inner message of the United Nations is love. The important message of the United Nations is oneness. Peace we feel, love we become, oneness we manifest. The League of Nations with a dream seed, the United Nations is a reality plant. The goal of the United Nations lies not only in thinking together, but in thinking alike. They want to bring humanity down to the occult level of the worship of Satan, which is exactly what Jesus Christ said would happen. World Federalists hold before us a vision of a unified mankind living in peace under a just world order. Now, the new civilization is to be global, planetary citizens. In essence, advance the planetary view and values, a new consciousness. The United Nations is the chosen instrument of God. To be the chosen instrument of God means to be a divine messenger, carving the banner of God's inner vision. You see, this whole thing is Antichrist all the way to the core. It is a rejection of Jesus Christ. All right? And little by little, a planetary prayer book is being composed by an increasingly united humanity, seeking its oneness, its happiness, its consciousness, its peace, its justice, and its full participation in a continuous process of creation. Humankind is seeking no less than a reunion with the divine. It transcends into every higher forms of life. This is a sheer blasphemous statement, according to the scriptures. And again, you see mankind pitting itself against God. And that's why God said in Psalm 2, why do the heathen rage? Why do they imagine a vain thing? Here's a book. It's a real book called World Scripture. And it is a compilation of all the religions of the world brought into it. And I believe this is going to be the World Bible, the project of the International Religious Foundation. And what do you find on chapter 1? Under ultimate reality, the all-seeing eye of Lucifer. This is no mistake, ladies and gentlemen. This is Antichrist to its core. And that is exactly what you see on the Great Seal of the United States. The United States was brought to power to bring in the new world order. So now to review it briefly, remember in Revelation, John said the beast was ancient Babylon, but the beast was not during the time of Rome. Now, if the beast was not during the days of Rome, that proves categorically that Rome is not the center of Bible prophecy, which is why if you look up in your concordance, you will find very little mention to Rome or Roman, but if you look it up under Babylon, you will find it all over the place. And Rome is not Babylon, as many people try to prove. Babylon is the United States. It is America, the center of the whole Antichrist power, the center of the wealth of the rich men of the earth, the great city Babylon, which shall rule over the kings of the earth. Because ye were glad, because ye rejoiced, O ye destroyers of mine heritage. All right, this is a reference to Babylon the Great. America had a heritage that was of God, and it turned upon it, and it destroyed it. And the world rule of Babylon shall ascend out of the nation of America in the last days. We're approaching the very last time, and as we enter the tribulation period, you're going to see the beast revive out of the modern setting of the United States of America. America does indeed have a destiny, and that destiny, according to the Word of God, is one of infamy and not of a proud tradition. She turned upon her heritage, and she destroyed it. Ancient Babylonia was a nation, the most powerful nation in the world in her time, and that was true under Nimrod, it was true under Nebuchadnezzar, and it's going to be true under the United States of America. She will rule out of New York, which fulfills the parameters all laid down for the great city Babylon, a seaport nation of great power that controls the kings of the earth from the United Nations building. And it's by the city of Babylon, of ancient, there was a great tower called the Tower of Babel, and that great tower signified one world government, one world religion, one world economy. That's exactly what the UN signifies. That's exactly what their stated goals are, and they intend to bring it about. There is no mistake here, ladies and gentlemen. There is no mistake or misinterpretation, because Jesus Christ said, as the days of Noah were, so shall also be the coming of the Son of Man. Noah lived 950 years, 350 of it after the flood. He saw the Tower of Babylon. He saw Nimrod's Babylon. He saw the one world government, and it is coming again. Sit thou silent, get thee into darkness, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt no longer be called the Lady of Kingdoms. America has been the lady of the kingdom. She is the leading nation of the world. She is the pride of the Chaldees, excellency according to the scriptures, and we have been the richest nation in the world, and we have had great abundance. As we go into the tribulation period, Babylon, or the United States, is robbed, and everything she does turns into dust. It's a judgment upon this nation by God the Father. But the merchants of the world had their home in Babylon, and they were called the rich men of the earth and the great merchants of the earth. And it was through their trading system that they brought all of this about. And through this secret money covenant that was made, they brought about their own destruction. They laid a trap for the world. They laid a trap for people of America, and the very trap that they laid is going to be sprung upon themselves. God showed me in a direct vision that the people of America and the rulers of America are set, and there is no extrication from it. It's going to go through, and it's a trap, and they will not be able to extricate themselves. She is the center of world trade, and the merchants of the earth weep and mourn over her. If you want to look into your almanacs, you will find that America is the leading importer, and she is second now as an exporter, but she used to be number one. But as we approach the tribulation period, she will export less and less and import more and more as she goes down. And it's a trading nation. The ships and people that trade by sea, all the nations trade by sea with her. That means she has to be a seacoast nation, and America is that. Iraq is not a seaport nation. Rome is not a seaport nation, nor is the EC. There are many, many parameters that none of the other so-called places where Babylon is to come from, they just do not fulfill the parameters. And there is something wrong with the heart that will not read God's word and accept God for what he says. She will be the leader in establishing a one-world government. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him and the beast, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, which is Jesus Christ, slain from the foundation of the world. If you do not know Jesus Christ, you're going to worship this system. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of beast, or the number of his name. And that is not the name of the beast, but the number of your name. She will be a mighty nation, and she will have within her borders then a mighty city. And the United States of America has a mighty city, and that's New York City, and that city will have a Tower of Babel, and New York City does have a Tower of Babel. It is the United Nations building. And Babylon will rule the world from that great city, and she will rule over the kings of the earth. And that woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Ladies and gentlemen, there can be no mistaking how this is fulfilled in America, New York City, and the United Nations. The United Nations is the modern Tower of Babel. The United Nations is the entity the rich men want to rule over the earth. You simply have to just simply read God's word, accept God's word for what he says. Now we're going to confirm this in Revelation 13 because it goes into a little more detail about the nature of the beast and how it comes to power. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, which is the revival of Babylon, the kingdom that was, the beast it was, having 7 heads, 7 kingdoms and nations, and 10 horns. Now the beast in Daniel has 1 head. This entity has 7 heads. And we're going to see how the rich nations of the earth fall into this thing and use the United States and the UN to bring it all to power. Who are the 7 heads? Well, this is a latter-day prophecy, and a beast rises up with 7 heads. It's not a historical view we're looking at now, so this is another clue that shows us how to figure out and verify who the beast is. The heads equals mountains, and mountains equals nations or kingdoms, and nations and kingdoms have kings that rule. And so the 7 heads are 7 key nations or empires that involve themselves, that form the beast through financial power. Because we know it's done through the power of finance. The Bible says so. All right? God fingers the rich men and says they form the system. The rich men are merchants and bankers, the great men of the earth, the rich men of the earth. The 7 nations are the richest nations then upon earth in the latter days, just before the tribulation period, who are capable of bringing the United Nations up to full power. Are they the G7 nations? The United States is the leader, Japan, Canada, Britain, France, Germany, and Italy. Is it not odd that even the world press calls them the G7, or the group of 7 nations? What is their agenda, these national leaders? At the 18th meeting in 1992, find the ways of establishing a new world order. All right? These people all come out of what they call the roundtable groups, the Bilderbergers, Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, Club of Rome, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, Institute for Pacific Relations, the Aspen Institute, Atlantic Institute. All of these groups are nothing more than groups formed by the rich men of the earth to accomplish their hidden agenda, which is to bring in the new world order, which is the order of Antichrist. This is what Jesus Christ warned you of. He told you it was coming, and now you know who it is and where it's coming from, and it is not the European Common Market or the EC. It is America and the United States. And this is how they did it, essentially. World War I, they laid the plans for the Russian Revolution, and in 1917, the Illuminati took Russia. When you think communists, think Illuminati. They set up this system. They also took the Federal Reserve System in 1913 in the United States of America. They set it up by law, and that gave our currency over to the rich men of the earth. We have a video on that. In 1920, they set up the League of Nations. In 1920-21, the Royal Institute of International Affairs was formed, and it's based in London, and the Council on Foreign Relations was formed, based in New York. Now, the Council on Foreign Relations has the symbol of the rider on a white horse, and that's not by accident. Now, Jesus said that you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in various places. We're seeing the famines, we're seeing the diseases, a renaissance of all the diseases, and major earthquakes are coming one on top of another. These are the beginnings. The Illuminati planned 3 world wars. They wrote a letter and said they were going to do it. World War II would bring Russia up to full parity with the West. And that's exactly what happened. The world was essentially split in two, and NATO got one part of it, and Russia got the other part. The United Nations is founded, based in New York City, by the CFR and the Communists, who were instrumental in its formation. Okay, from 45 to 54, the international bankers pit America against Russia. They finance both sides in a gigantic arms race. This allows for the development of the weapons they'll need to control the world in the end, and the weapon systems that will later be used are financed by the people themselves. It's all financed by the citizens of the countries via sacrifice and taxes, because they are told their enemy will destroy them. So they made Russia appear the very real enemy of America, and they made the United States appear the very real enemy of Russia. And so the United Nations then is slowly brought to the forefront as the only hope for mankind to avoid ultimate war that destroys the planet Earth. In 1954, the Bilderberger Group forms, and they are one of the most powerful bodies of the elite in the world. And from 1955 and beyond, the Club of Rome was formed and based in Rome in 1968, and the Club of Rome issued Global 2000 report, which called for a tremendous rollback in the population of the world. It's called Global 2000. You can get a copy of it from Washington. In 1973, the Trilateral Commission is formed, based in New York. It's a Rockefeller operation. David Rockefeller is the chairman. He's the honorary chairman right now, and they call for a new world order. Here is their symbol, which is a pyramid, 3 sixes, and an upside-down cross. The United Nations increases its activities and affairs of the sovereign nations, Somalia being an example. Bosnia will be another one, and if there is a revolution in the United States will be another one. All right? There is to be a final war, according to the Illuminati papers found. It is World War III, to be fought and started between Syria and Israel, and it will bring, the whole purpose is to bring the United Nations up to full power in the world. And this is confirmed by the Baha'i faith. They say that the goal of a new world order, we have but to turn our gaze to humanity's blood-stained history to realize that nothing short of intense mental as well as physical agony has been able to precipitate these epoch-making changes that constitute the greatest landmarks in the furtherance of a new world order. This is what they're after. And it says that the forces of the world catastrophe can alone precipitate such a new phase of human thought, alas, becoming increasingly apparent, that nothing short of the fire of a severe ordeal, read, i.e., World War III, unparalleled in its intensity, i.e., nuclear, confuse and weld the discordant entities that constitute the elements of present-day civilization into the integral components of a world commonwealth. In other words, they don't care if they have to kill billions of people in order to bring about their world order. That is nothing to them. And the reason it's nothing to them is because it's nothing to Satan. He hates mankind. Most of the vast majority of mankind are going to die and be sent into eternal damnation, and the suffering that they suffer down there will be far worse than anything they can suffer up here, so it is nothing to Satan to kill off billions of people. But the key is that they plan to do it. And in the case of the United States in particular, this is a Baha'i faith document, tribulations on a scale unprecedented in its U.S. history and calculated to purge its institutions, to purify the hearts of its people, to fuse its constituent elements, and to weld it into one entity with its sister nations. In other words, America can only be brought into the United Nations one world order by undergoing a severe dislocation. The whole earth, says the Baha'i faith, is now in a state of pregnancy. And that's exactly what Jesus Christ termed would happen just before the end. That they would go through what is called the birth pangs to bring in the kingdom of Christ. But you see, Christ said before his kingdom would come, an Antichrist would come. And so what you're seeing now are all the signs of the Antichrist coming, not Jesus Christ coming. When they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. Let no man deceive you by any means. The day of Christ, when he actually comes, will not come except there come a falling away first, the apostasy, and the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God. He goes into the temple, and that is the revelation of the Antichrist. Even him, whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the agape love of the truth, Jesus Christ, that they might be saved. And because they refused Christ and refused to do what he commanded them to do so that they could obtain agape love, they lose out and they go into eternal ruin. This is the document right out of the United Nations. This is Antichrist to the core. From the point of light, Lucifer, within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love, within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. It's a document right out of the United Nations Plaza. From the Lucas Trust, which has been changed, it was Lucifer Trust, and it merges right with the Temple of Understanding. You see how it all fits together, ladies and gentlemen? They mean it. They are going to do it.
Gentlemen, long, long ago, our forefathers made a covenant, and they died so that we might become the sovereigns of the world. Here we are, gentlemen, and we have done it. World War III has accomplished what we desired. All the weapons of war have been turned over to us. All the nations have granted us the power to rule over them. Gentlemen, we have accomplished our mission, and Lucifer has been installed as the sovereign of the world. Our first initial project is called Project Lightmaker, a top-secret activity to exterminate all Christians from the face of the earth and anybody who stands in our way.